Welcome to the West Ham Voice. Look, still temporary accommodation here. We're in between properties until we move into our permanent home. It's going to be another couple of weeks. I've got to make do with no backdrop, no proper studio setup. So I do apologise for that, but I hope it doesn't ruin your enjoyment of the videos that I'm putting out. So welcome to the West Ham Voice, and we now have another international break. And whenever there's an international break, the stories that usually might not see the light of day, we now have appearing in the limelight. You know, when the Premier League is on, we talk about the football. When it's not, we try to look for other things to discuss. And this week, we have none other than the regurgitated story that Karren Brady might be poised to resign her post at West Ham United. Now, I wasn't going to do a show about this, but the thing that piqued my interest was that Gio did a show directly about this on Hammer's Chat. And Gio always states, he's quite straightforward, Gio. He always states that he's not in the business of being an ITK, but he himself has heard from two separate sources about this particular story. Now, it doesn't make the story any more or less true, but it does add a certain element of spice to it. When Gio starts quoting sources, then you know that perhaps it is quite a serious subject to discuss. Look, if Brady was to resign, she would be deemed as the ultimate sacrificial lamb under David Sullivan's watch. I mean, they've worked together for over 30 years. First as managing director at Birmingham City, then, of course, moving to take over West Ham with the late David Gold and David Sullivan. So if this rumor is true, even remotely true, then this is a big seismic change in the working relationship between Brady and Sully. She's been by Sullivan's side for so long that one has to ask whether this might be the start of the end of Sullivan's ownership at West Ham. Look, if you're new to the West Ham Voice, or if you've watched the channel before, there's a QR code that's appeared in the corner there to become a subscriber. If you've yet to become a subscriber, all you've got to do is click on that QR code. It takes you straight to the subscription page. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Subscription, by the way, is totally free. If you don't want to do that, please, at the end of the show, if you enjoy the content, please hit the like button. And also, there's a hype button below the video. If you click on that, it promotes the video for other viewers to watch. And if you're feeling particularly generous, you can also become a member of the West Ham Voice. You get slightly extra content for that at $1.99 a month. And all the money raised through the membership scheme goes to Prostate Cancer UK. It's a cancer charity that's close to my heart. That's the recent operation I've had. Hence why I would donate the money that I earn from the membership scheme to that charity. And they received a check of £320 or a credit card payment of £320, which was generated by you fans, by you members. So thank you for that. All right, let's go back to the story. Let's assume that there is a semblance of truth in the story and Brady did resign her post at West Ham. If so, what would actually change at the club? And crucially, will her leaving be enough to calm the section of the fan base who are currently protesting? Or will the likes of Hammers United, WHUIC, and Crossed Hammers continue to demand yet even more change? For some time, fan groups have been calling for changes to the way the club is run on the footballing side of things. And many believe that a lot of the poor decisions that have been made over the years on how we manage transfers and the signing of managers has actually been down to Brady herself. And we've only got to look at the recent disaster when she assigned family friend Graham Potter to manage the team. Now, as I've stated on many occasions, when it comes to West Ham United, the business end of things, it always seems to be okay, whilst the footballing side of the business has suffered and has been badly managed over time. But even now, the business side of things has got to be questioned, given that the board has been banging on about not being able to compete properly in the transfer market because of PSR and the lack of cash flow. But when fans shout for boardroom changes, it's because they feel that the people pulling the strings, like Brady, have lost sight of the football, the identity, and the direction of this football club. Calls for Karren Brady's resignation are about accountability, and the protests have become sustained and visible, especially in mainstream media. So, how realistic is a Karren Brady resignation? Well, I guess anything is possible. She's a visible figure and a target of fan anger. Resignation is often the easiest lever for a club to pull if it wants to show that it's listening to fan discontent. But let's be honest, resignations in football are usually political and negotiated. They don't always mean that the underlying problems disappear overnight. A vice chair stepping aside removes a face, but not necessarily a structure. So, realistic? Yeah, absolutely. It's possible that she could resign. Transformational in the way that West Ham United is run? Well, not on its own merit. If Brady goes, here's what you'll see from the club straight away. Supporters will feel there's been a momentary win. The recent protests will have a sense of empowerment. A real victory can be claimed that the protests have actually led to removing a focal point at the club. The club will inevitably put out a statement about a new chapter. Follow meetings with the FAB, the Fan Advisory Board, is likely to be announced, and expect briefings about how governance will be reviewed or an independent advisor will be drafted in to create a blueprint for West Ham's future. But operationally, there's not going to be much instant change. Ownership, budgets, transfer policies, and the day to day football decisions won't shift because of one director leaving, even if it is someone as high profile as Karren Brady. The engine keeps running unless the board replaces personnel with people with different mandates, in this case, a footballing mandate. And that is one of the big fundamental changes that the fan groups want to see, the fan protest groups want to see. So the immediate picture is a symbolic victory, a reset of tone, but not a guarantee of better scouting, smarter transfers, or better management of the club. Where the moment becomes meaningful is if the club uses this exit to deliver real structural reform. So here's what could happen. Here's what could or should happen, and what should be on the table. A director of football, or whatever title you want to give this role, would need to be given full autonomy from the board. Appointing a director of football with a clear remit and budgetary authority would be the single most effective step. That person needs authority over things like transfers and what manager comes in, etc. The scouting of players, the data and analytics, and the player pathway all play a role in that and should be the remit of the director of football. No more split signals between directors, board directors, and coaches when the January and the summer transfer windows arrive. It will be one specific role by the director of football to determine the shape and future of this club. But for this to happen, it isn't just Brady who would need to resign. David Sullivan would need to step aside too. But we all know that this is less likely to happen. The FAB, the Fan Advisory Board, is likely to be reinvented yet again to ensure full fan representation and transparency, and not just become a box ticking exercise. And a short independent audit of the current footballing operations with a public timetable for proposed changes should also be on the table. Now, if Brady's resignation triggers these kinds of reforms, then it's more than just a symbolic exit. It becomes a leverage point. That's the blueprint clubs who have progressed tend to adopt. Importantly, these are not cosmetic changes, they're fundamental infrastructure moves. Now, would that stop the fan base from protesting? Maybe, but not necessarily guaranteed. There is still the issue of David Sullivan at the helm, being the main decision maker at the club, as well, of course, as the issue that fans have with the stadium not being fit for football purposes. But a Brady resignation demonstrates a sizable shift within the club itself. But if Brady leaves and David Sullivan stays within the same structure, then I'm not so sure that the fan base will feel that this is an overall victory. Organisers have repeatedly said that they want to They want both Brady and Sullivan gone. So, for many reasons, a resignation of Brady alone could be insufficient. Now, the question, of course, that everyone keeps asking is, would David Sullivan sell up? Realistically, a sale is absolutely doable, but long winded and complicated. Selling a Premier League club is never instant. Valuations, investors, due diligence, the footballing regulator, checks, that all takes time, an awful lot of effort, and money. There have been rumours of interest in the club historically, and but for Sullivan to sell, the mathematics must add up. An acceptable price must be agreed, and certainly the buyers would have to demonstrate that they can not only afford to buy the club, but they could actually invest in the club to improve it from where it currently is. Look, Sullivan might sell, or he might seek partial investors the way he did when he introduced Daniel Kretinsky a few years ago, or he might stay put and nothing much changes apart from Brady leaving. Now, if Sullivan stays and simply oversees a reshuffle, fans will read that as a status quo. His continued presence without genuine structural independence for footballing operations will feel like change in name only. And for the protesters, that is unlikely to be enough. If Sullivan remains, like I've already stated, there are things that he can and the board can bring in to demonstrate meaningful change. I've already said, commit to an independent director of football appointed with contractual autonomy, accept potentially an independent review of how the club is run on the footballing side of things, with plans to introduce fundamental changes, and pledge targeted investment in the transfer recruitment infrastructure with transparency on budgets. Now, if Sullivan stayed and he pledged all that, then maybe it will show at least intent. Now, whether fans trust the pledge will be dependent on speed, clarity, and specifically who would be ultimately responsible for the actual involvement in the decision making. Now, even with structural reform and a Brady resignation, some fans will still want further change, including and the ultimate being a change of ownership. But that's the one area I still personally find puzzling with the whole protests. Change as to who is involved in running the footballing side of things, fine. It means Sullivan stepping to one side. But then to demand change and at the same time demand Sullivan sells up is again a big question mark for me. For a significant slice of fans, only fresh ownership will feel like a clean break from the era that they blame for the decline in the club. For others, clear governance, transparency, and sporting competence could be enough to end the unrest. Karren Brady's resignation is a possibility and would be a meaningful symbolic win. But symbolism alone may not be enough to fix how player transfers are managed and how governance is also managed. The real test to a Brady resignation is the what happens next. If change happens quickly and visibly, protests could dissipate. If they do not, fans will press on, louder, longer, and more organized. And whether David Sullivan sells remains an open question, and his staying will make or break whether changes feel really genuine or not.